16 жовтня продовжую роботу медіа-центру України. Мене звати
So we continue to our work, and today we are going to have a presentation of into the cognitive de-occupation of Crimea, and we have today Tamila Tasheva, permanent representative of President in Crimea, Onyshchenko, team leader, Partnership Fund for Resilient Ukraine, and Anton Hrushetskyi, CEO, Miss KIIS. Today we are going to talk about the cognitive de-occupation of Crimea, and it's important to emphasize this topic because physical liberation doesn't mean that we will return Crimea. It's been 10 years under occupation, and there have been a lot of changes, including cognitive changes. And Tamila, I would like to give you the floor to talk about why it is important to study and what Ukrainian society need to focus on after the victory, after the Crimea is returned, and why do we need to study these processes. Hello to everyone. Thank you, and dear colleagues, dear journalists, dear media professionals. First of all, I would like to thank Partnership Fund for this opportunity to work together and to continue our work and conduct social surveys that we are presenting today, and also to work and continue our effort. The Crimea Cognitive De-occupation Council can continue to work, design documents, and organize media events, communication events, cultural events dedicated to the future liberation and de-occupation of Crimea. Of course, I would like to thank KIIS, Institute of Sociology, for their research, this complicated topic. It was studied, it's a cross-sectoral study, and it involved quantitative and qualitative research, media space monitoring, first of all, Telegram channels, of course, that were studied by our colleagues, and we will come to that a little bit later. And I probably will start with why this research is important. I think you followed today, just 20 minutes ago, the presentation of the victory plan by President Zelensky ended at the Verkhovna Rada. And in his speech, he mentioned all those 5 items, and all of them were about Ukraine's victory, including fair peace for Ukraine. And fair, comprehensive, stable, and sustainable peace for Ukraine is impossible without liberating all our areas and territories. If we don't liberate them, it will mean that those sacrifices we've unfortunately made throughout these 10 years of our territory's occupation, civilians and servicemen who died and servicemen who continue to fight for Ukraine, it will be in vain. And we cannot allow that. Despite all the sideline and other discussions our partners may have, our position is strong. We insist on our territorial sovereignty. It is outlined in the peace formula proposed by in 2022 at Indonesian summit, and this is what underlines the peace formula and the victory plan that was presented today. Of course, this research that we are going to present today is important to show the attitude of our people towards the occupied areas, including Crimea, to show the sentiment in the mainland Ukraine and the sentiments of people in the occupied areas. The attitude, social distance, attitude to the reintegration policies that the government is designing now, It's also about collaboration and this high demand for justice among our people. This is also about the historical memory, toponyms and place names, the future status of this autonomous Republic of Crimea, functioning of public governance in this land. So basically, we conducted in-depth interviews and conducted quantitative social surveys and gained a lot of and collected a lot of data. And what we are going to present today, it will reflect, of course, the key results of the research. The full version will be available on our website, on missions, present missions website. It's a large research with anonymized quotes from our citizens, from the focus groups conducted in the government-controlled areas, as well as separately we had interviews with people who are still living in the occupied areas, and it was very important to us. And of course, just if I may, I just give a couple of figures, and the rest I will leave to the team to present to Kyiv Sociological Institute. And I said about that it's important for us to talk about the territorial sovereignty and return of our territories, and this research just proves this point. 90% of Ukrainian citizens agree that Crimea should be returned under Ukraine's control. 94% of our citizens disagree that Crimea has always been Russian and has only a Russian past. And as part of our work, on cognitive de-occupation, that's what we are trying to debunk, those myths. And we believe that our work and the efforts by other state institutions working with policy memory and debunking Russian nature of Crimea, they are now proven by the social surveys. But unfortunately, we also have to say that 58% of our citizens say they don't have enough knowledge about Crimea. On the other hand, there is a high demand for this knowledge, and today, when this research is presented, you will see that. What's important to us is to hold such surveys. I think that's not the last one, because when designing our state policies, we need to ask our citizens, we need to understand what their vision is around the currently occupied areas. That's why I urged my colleagues from the government sector, from public sector, the journalists, please have a look at this research to make sure that the work you do in going forward around occupied areas, including the communication activities that you are conducting, it should rely upon the vision and the demand that we can see among our people around towards the occupied areas. Thank you, Tamila. Anna, Partnership Fund for Resilient Ukraine, your fund supported this research. Why do you believe these insights that were gained are important to establish that fair peace Tamila was talking about? Hello to everyone at this presentation of this important research, Crimea Cognitive De-occupation research. First of all, a couple of words about the fund supporting this research. It's a multi-donor, multi-year program financed by 8 governments, close friends of Ukraine. It's UK, Estonia, Canada, Netherlands, US, Finland, Switzerland, and Sweden. And hopefully we will see another 9th member joining our partnership, Norway. The goal of the Partnership Fund is to strengthen the resilience of the Ukrainian state, strengthen its unity and territorial integrity. That's why it's quite logical for us to support this research together with the President's mission in Crimea, to help them design key documents around Crimea reintegration, including the cognitive de-occupation strategy. But any state policies should be well informed and based on evidence. That's why the mission reached out to us asking to conduct this research to understand better those factors influencing the reintegration and be able to build the strategy implementation measures more efficiently. Because it's important to understand what are the challenges we are facing, understand, as Tamila said, the attitude of Crimeans, of mainland Ukrainians, what is the undistorted history of Crimea, people's vision of future Crimea expectations, because then we will be able to design ways, reintegration processes based on educated and evidence-based approach, and it's key to our success. I don't want to spoil anything, spoil the presentation results, but only 8% of respondents participated in this research believe that Ukrainian media give enough information about Crimea. And similar small amount of respondents believe themselves to be well informed about Crimea. What the research showed, there is a huge gap among the youth, because just a small portion of the respondents, of the young respondents, believe that, first of all, they are optimistic about Crimea's reintegration, Crimea's return to Ukraine in the short run, but they don't see it as an important issue, unlike the older generations. And it's really unsurprising. My children, they haven't been to Crimea. They don't have a sense that we do, that we got as part of our travels there. That's why it's important to raise this topic. Education is important, which was mentioned by the experts participating in the research, as well as ordinary citizens. And of course, Ukrainian government should be prepared in terms of the methodology, organizationally, legally, for the reintegration and governance of Crimea now. We cannot wait until the actual liberation of Crimea to start preparations. Similarly, Ukrainian people in Crimea and on the mainland Ukraine, they need to be informed and well prepared. In that way, we will be able to avoid conflicts and challenges in the reintegration process. It's important to work on the history, the traumas caused by the occupation regime, collaboration, language issue. Because when we are prepared, when we are better informed, we will be more efficient and more successful. And I hope that this research will be an input towards that. Thank you, Anna. Anton, I would like to give you the floor for the survey results. We had a couple of spoilers, but I think there will be more interesting insights coming. And I'd like to emphasize that everyone here can take a copy of this research. Could you please tell us the key facts and figures? Thank you for this opportunity to conduct this research, because we see this trend that in Ukraine there is a rising interest among the government, among civil society, and it's important. Vox Populi, Vox Dei, that's important. It means that it's important to hear the voice of the people. that's why we need to factor that in, because some pain points and fears, misunderstanding, lack of information, we need to find out all of these gaps and work with them. And Crimea liberation is, of course, an important issue because we really do have few information, lots of myths amplified by social media. After the full-scale invasion, most of the information is consumed in the social media. On the one hand, people believe themselves to be qualified to identify myth and disinformation, but it's not true. And they use these sources, say they think they know all the truth, but we need to debunk that. Now let's talk about the research. It's a comprehensive research. We had 2014 interviews with people in the government-controlled areas. It was a representative research. We also had focus groups with Ukrainian nationals, 2 focus groups with Crimean Tatars living in government-controlled areas. Unfortunately, we were unable to have a full national survey in Crimea because of the security reasons. But we had 6 in-depth interviews with peninsular residents and 9 interviews with experts addressing the issues around Crimea. On top of that, we monitored Telegram channels related to Crimea. We will not go into detail here, but hopefully we will publish this report soon, and you will be able to know the tone of voice, the topics, and the sentiment. Now let's move on to the key figures. First section is about the ethnical structure and makeup in Crimea. As we don't have access to the peninsula, we cannot accurately assess it, but we can get some general idea. First of all, it's not a monolithic group. There are ethnic groups that have different orientations. And I mean people, pro-Russian people and pro-Ukrainian people, including Ukrainians who feel themselves belonging to Ukraine, Crimean Tatars. There are others who believe themselves to be Crimeans, like identity, ethnic group. And these are key issues. What's being imposed upon us is that there is only one identity in Crimea, but it's not true. There are different segments, different groups, differently responding to war, to liberation, and it means that we don't need to view them as one single whole. We need to have different approaches in terms of communication, in terms of attitude. And as we can see from our research, Crimean Tatars, they maintain their ethnic identity. When it comes to ethnic Ukrainians, the situation is more challenging, because during the Soviet times, Ukrainians moved there, they stayed there, their identity is easier blurred, and it's difficult for them to maintain their identity, especially under the pressure of those myths about one country, one people. It's a pressure on ethnic Ukrainians, but they stay there, and it means that we need to mark them as traitors. We need to understand the roots of the problem and address them. And for your understanding, we could forget, but this is how the peninsula looked like in 2014. We did the survey in 2013 asking people, what do you consider yourself, regardless of your passport? And you can see that there is no consensus. Yes, we have 40% of people who identify themselves as Russians, but the majority, like 25%, identified as island residents. There were other groups like Ukrainians, Crimean Tatars. So this peninsula is a mixture of different segments we need to work with. It's not a single entity that is reflecting Russian interests. And it was 10 years ago. Now, according to experts, about a million people could move from Russia. Of course, the balance changed. More Russians, less Crimean Tatars, who are forced out of the peninsula by repressions. the Ukrainian number of Ukrainians remains stable only because after the full-scale invasion, some people moved to Crimea to avoid hostilities. But the situation is still complex with no simple solutions. Of course, we would like to see these solutions, but we need to think about them already now. When it comes to current situation in Crimea, we discussed that with experts. And just a disclaimer, when we are talking about the positive implications of the occupation, it's what in their heads, in people's heads. It may not be objective reality, but that's the image that was created, especially in the island, but also in the peninsula, but also in Ukrainians' heads. And we need to address that. Yes, it's sad, it's social welfare. You can remember that before 2014, many people were talking about high pensions and social payments in Russia, creating pressure on Ukrainian population. Well, welfare, vacancies, stronger public security. These are positive implications touted by Russian state. But there are negative changes. Social payments. People saw early increase, but then prices rose and the freedom of enterprise went down. Of course, Ukraine was imperfect, but the level of freedom was higher in Ukraine as compared to Russia. Infrastructure harming the environment, and just this case with Kherson in Sevastopol being built upon propaganda and repressions, worse deteriorating sense of security, because on one hand you may see better, stronger public security, but on the other hand you may get up into jail. So you cannot avoid that. And for ordinary Ukrainians, the issue of Crimean Tatars has become more relevant after the occupation. It's good that we look at it now and we realize what are the conditions the Crimean Tatars are living in. Another key indicator is that we only have 8% of people who understand and know well about Crimea. And next slide will show that there are only 9% who consider themselves to be well informed. Some people say more or less, but probably it means that people don't want to show their ignorance in this issue. And this research we didn't study in detail what people know, but Crimean topic is also very often discussed, and we talk about the liberation of our areas, the peace, and we think about Crimea, what can we change, how can we replace it?
So whether they will use the nuclear weapons or no. So we're not thinking along the vector that we're striving to take. So the matter of reintegration, of course, and you know, it's also the matter that is in the heads of people, whether we think those areas are ours, whether Russia is right in their, thinking of the Crimea is there. So we asked people that, and 89% of Ukrainians don't support that. And of course, there a micro percentage of Ukrainians, they support the Russian propaganda messages, but almost 90% and more think that Crimea must be deoccupied, and people, most of them understand that the Crimea will not be liberated soon, but we are ready to wait, and we will bring back our people and our territories. Also, the same goes for perception of Crimea as a motherland for Crimean Tatars. Almost 90% of people understand that Crimea is not just a resort that will bring back, but also it's a motherland of certain people. And so there are a lot of questions to historians as to Crimean being Russian historically or Ukrainian, but most of the people support that Crimea should be part of Ukraine. And most of the Ukrainians think that, Crimean are resisting. There is no consensus about Crimea having, supported and received calmly the occupation, but being resistant. One of the most points of conflict for the future, and we understand that it may be in the furthest future, but we shall hope that in the closest future, how the Crimea will look following the de-occupation, and it's quite complex. So 20% of respondents said they think that it should be national autonomy, and 39% think that it should have the same status that it had before 2014, and 36% think that Crimea has to be an oblast of Ukraine. Of course, it's a matter of awareness, maybe low awareness, but this should have a strong potential both for the continental Ukraine and the Crimeans. But also the state of Ukraine needs to understand in which direction they want to take. So almost less than 1/3 of Ukrainians are informed about what the national autonomy is, but such concept is not well known to the Ukrainians in general. So the same goes for about 63% of Ukrainians are ready to perceive this concept of Crimean Tatar national territorial autonomy. So Ukrainians saw the resistance of Crimean Tatars on the peninsula, and that they were repressed. But this is, of course, the matter of a joint approach in this matter, and also attitude towards different categories of population. So, of course, we can see some sort of messages of perceptions towards people as renegades and traitors for the ones that stayed. But in fact, the research showed that there is no clear negative stance. Of course, we can see some sort of anxiousness that we need to be aware of and take it seriously. Like the perceptions towards the residents of Luhansk and Donetsk, the attitude is neutral. To those who relocated to the continental Ukraine, the attitude is closer to more positive rather than to those who stayed in the occupation, where the attitude is closer to neutral. So similar questions we pose to. There is a Bogart scale of distality, and we have been using that for our research, and the index is 1 to 7. 1 is less closed perception or attitude, and 7 is top closed attitude. So for most Ukrainians, it's 2. So for most people who are now living in Crimea, it's 3. So, but we can say that generally Ukrainians are open to the Crimeans and people living in the occupied territories. So we can say that we're pro territorial integrity and just peace. 55% of respondents say that to them personally, the occupation of the Crimean Peninsula is very important. 15.9% of respondents said that it's rather important. Of course, it depends on how we perceive it, whether our glass is half full or half empty. So we can say that following these 10 years of occupation, our glass is half full. And of course, this is the component of the de-occupation of Crimea is a component of the just peace. Half of the respondents, maybe a bit less than a half, believe that Crimea can be deoccupied in less than 1 to 5 years. But absolute minority said that it would never take place. Many respondents said that we would wait, we would hope for the black swan of the Russian Federation. But in fact, the main message is that we stay with Crimea, and Crimea is part of Ukraine. And of course, what is interesting that there is a range of attitudes depending on the age group, because the younger Ukrainians, they are less aware maybe of the Crimean situation, and they think that the occupation, the possibility of the occupation is less probable. So probably we need to remind them of the importance of Crimea being brought back to Ukraine. 70.2% of respondents think that there should be quotas of positions for representatives of the Crimean Tatar people at the level of local authorities and local self-government in Crimea after its deoccupation, whereas 62.7% percentage of respondents say that there should be quotas for representatives of the Crimean Tatar people and other indigenous peoples of Ukraine in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. So following that a question whether the government, self-government in Crimea should be appointed or elected, and so many people think that following the occupation, elections shall take place. People still think, like half of the respondents think that Crimeans are eligible to vote and select their power holders. 50% think that maybe it should be a bit in a lengthier period. And Ukraine is quite often accused of dictatorship, but in fact we're showing a democratic attitude even in this matter. Regarding voting restrictions, there is an opinion split, but most of the respondents, they support the temporary voting restrictions, so it's still debatable. Regarding the education in Crimea. So what is education? Especially in Russia, it's a militarized institution that sends certain narratives. The teachers of history are not just teachers of history, but they carry certain senses. So we were asking whether all the teachers should be fired or all the education officials. So most people, a minority of respondents said that all the education officials of all ranks should be made redundant. And a debatable question as to the leadership of educational establishments should be all fired, but probably there will be a differential approach, yes, to leadership being made redundant, but then also maybe there should be some investigation made who were collaborators and who were the victims of the situation. And the question as to there should be introduce a temporary transition period for the Russian language being used in the peninsula. So this is a debatable issue, and there is no unified response across the sample. So regarding the punishment, Ukrainians want justice now, and following the de-occupation, punishment for collaboration. So we asked whether people, the residents of Crimea who received Russian passports, many respondents would say that people were forced due to circumstances to receive those passports. But Ukrainians are mentally open and understand that there is space for dialogue, and of course there is a certain explanation why certain categories of residents forced to accept the Russian passport. We asked whether certain categories of residents should be punished for collaboration. We asked about penalties for certain officials and media workers. Some people think that inclusive of the previous categories, educational workers should be punished partly or all. In any case, justice will mean differentiated but a unified approach. Also, we asked about medical workers, and of course there was differentiation for the treatment of the leadership and or the people of lower ranks like repairmen. You cannot turn all the residents into enemies. So the memorialization policy and monument policy. Many Ukrainians think that Russian and Soviet symbols and monuments should be demolished. Many of them, of the respondents, 52% think that the monuments should be knocked down, but many of the respondents said that 36% that there should be a special committee or commission put up to take decisions on those matters. Regarding the place names policy and renaming policy, 55% of the respondents think that there should be new names that reflect the cultural heritage of all ethnic groups in Ukraine. 19.7% think that there should be restoration of historical Crimean Tatar names that were named after the annexation, and 19.4% think that the current names should live unchanged. So it's the approach is not that we will punish you all by imposing our will. Of course, there should be a consensus, the options that we'll need to arrive at. Of course, to the military burials, of course, there should be no Russian symbols, but the burial places should leave for those who want to visit them. We also discussed the lines of conflict, whether Crimea should be Crimean, an autonomous republic. Of course, also the attitude between the indigenous Crimeans and the pro-Russian residents. So, of course, we'll need to look for certain shared relatives shared by the us as Ukrainian nation. So many people think that the deportation will never take place because of our dependence from the donors, from the external donors. So we'll need to look for compromise decisions. So regarding the Russian Crimeans belonging to the Russian Orthodox Church, most of the Crimeans belong to Russian Orthodox Church, but it's important that this moment should not be a cornerstone. Of course, there should be a model that should be developed in advance. So that probably is it regarding the core results. Thank you, Anton, for this informative research. There have been a lot of insights. Dear colleagues, if there are any questions, you'll be able to ask them. Tamila, this research should be the basis, the foundation for the strategy of the cognitive de-occupation. How will it be used, and will there be further research to track the dynamics and following the victory, the liberation, there will be change in the societies, and there will be maybe the results that can be different depending on how we deal with it. Well, I would say that the work on cognitive de-occupation started in 2023. The first document was created by mid-2023. Then the expert council on cognitive de-occupation started functioning, including around over 50 experts from the state environment, expert environment, our media, journalists colleagues, and that's where a roadmap was developed regarding the implementation of this strategy, and the main lines and the strands were reflected in those documents that were developed. And for us, it was important to pilot, so to say, to test our theories that we have put together with the experts regarding the memorialization. The state has shaped certain vision, and we had to understand what is the attitude of the residents across Ukraine towards different issues, towards collaboration, for example, because this was defined, collaboration was defined in the state documents in April 2023. But we who work with occupied territories, we understand that the regulations that were introduced and passed by the members of parliament, they need to be revisited. Regarding the collaboration activities, I have been speaking about that with the colleagues. Our residents are rather smarter in many aspects than the representatives, some representatives of the self-governing governing bodies or policymakers. In fact, the residents are wiser, I would say, because the regulatory acts of Ukrainian law, some of them envisage collective responsibility, almost collective responsibility for the residents that are living in the occupied territories, even though those residents have never done any crimes. I cannot see the figures now because the figures are small on the screen. I don't remember what's the percentage of businesses in the occupied territories. Of course, there is of course no wish to claim their collaborators. And the Code of Ukraine, Article 19, says that if you doing a business in an occupied territory, you are paying taxes and you're collaborating with the occupier, with the occupiers. And if we look now at the cases that come from Kharkiv and Zaporizhia oblasts that are put on the ledger on the pre-trial ledger, and the court decisions that are ruled out, we can see that some of those people were claimed guilty. Also, regarding the medical workers or first responders or the respondents of the research, our Ukrainians, think that they shouldn't be pledged guilty. Some of the figures state that yes, 90% support. 90% of the respondents support that the officials have to be hold accountable, the leadership 78%, but of course if you're a regular community or utility service worker, and if you do the landscaping, you have been doing just your job, but in most cases you are not part of spreading propaganda. And of course the opinion of our residents should be taken into account, so that the state policy reflects the stance of our residents. And of course the status of the autonomy is a complex issue, and I understand that it could be a divide potentially. And if we look at what is being discussed on social media, how it is discussed, the question of the future status, and when we ask directly regarding the autonomy, the percentage of positive responses is higher. But if you put the answer, if you phrase it differently, and take a deeper dive, you see that people are not really aware of what the national territorial autonomy means. And the fact is, our citizens do not remember what the autonomy was of the make of pre-2014. For many citizens, they're so messed up. They think that the autonomy that existed before 2014 was the Crimean Tatar autonomy, as it was, and a number of research efforts showed that, and I was surprised. And of course, we may say that the Majlis of the Crimean Tatar people should be responsible for, awareness-raising efforts, and the figures that we see for the young people, we may conclude that the young people who haven't been attending Crimea for 12 years, Crimea, there was an annexation attempt, and the young people that were not living there, they lost touch, or maybe never had touch with this territory, and their level of awareness is low. We as state representatives, we have been doing different awareness-raising sessions with young people, with students, to explain why Crimea is important, and why it is important also for the people who are living in occupation. But it was important for us, I'll repeat myself, to actually test the strategy, and to ask our residents' opinion regarding the strategic documents that have been developed. Thank you, Tamila. Do you have any questions?
And one more question from me. The results of this survey showed that there is a vacuum in knowledge around different issues. You mentioned you work with youth through different tools, and some issues, they need to be addressed by the media, by communication campaigns. Are you going to conduct such campaigns to make sure that Crimea is more present in Ukrainian's media space? Well, that's what we are doing, and we are using different tools. And we are trying to work inside Ukraine and outside Ukraine. It's a complex issue. For example, when it comes to the understanding of Crimea's history, we are trying to work with address this issue not only using communications, not only media. Of course, we are using them. We are engaging them. We engage with international journalists, with diplomats, with diplomatic missions coming to Ukraine. But also we are using the academic community. For example, First Lady Olena Zelenska, in July this year, she announced an initiative called Global Coalition of Ukrainian Studies. Different academic institutions across the globe, we want to see Ukrainian studies opening up there, including a Crimean Tatar component, because we understand that it's not this misunderstanding, this poor knowledge of Crimea's history and the policies that are being designed in Ukraine, in other countries. They are based on this poor understanding and on poor understanding of the academic circles. Because for decades, the academic community had this pro-Russian lens based on Russian studies, Slavic studies, Eastern European studies, but there are no Ukrainian studies. That's why the way it works abroad, maybe it's not the case in Ukraine, but abroad, the academic circles play an active role in decision-making, in policy-making abroad. Quite often, Prime Minister or Parliament Speaker of some country or some other institutions, they are actively engaging with the academic community when they are designing policies and decisions. That's why this academic community, they have this quite special vision of Crimea's history, and based on that, they give their proposals. That's why it's a separate stream we are working on. And going forward, it influences different media events that we conduct. When it comes to Ukraine, yes, we do communication campaigns around memory policy, resistance, and actually it was mentioned in the presentation, and I believe that it's up to the government, up to civil society to actively promote this topic, the topic of resistance that has not stopped for during those 10 years. On the 26th of February, Ukraine marks the Occupation Resistance Day, Crimea Occupation Resistance Day, and we had an information campaign and on billboards and online, and we are grateful to the journalists that supported us. And of course, we had information campaign on the 18th of May. It's the Crimean Tatar Deportation Day, and this act, it was recognized as act of genocide by Poland. I don't know about the results of voting in Estonia. They are voting today in their parliament. So this is a complex issue. It's not only about some interviews and message boxes and sending information to colleagues, asking them to use the right terms. It's a comprehensive issue that includes academic component, media presence component, working with civil society who need to support us. And we, as the governmental institutions, of course, we are actively supporting that. Thank you, Tamila. I would like to thank our guests. I would like to remind that we had a presentation of Crimea Cognitive De-occupation Studies. Media Center will continue our work tomorrow. Thank you for being with us, and stay on.